Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. TheSketchMonkey here. I'm back here, yes, at Winslow BMW because they have something special today, and this is the 2022 BMW M2 competition. I've been waiting a long time to review this car because, in my opinion, I'm not sure which one I prefer, the new M2 or the old M2. When it comes to design, I think I actually prefer this one. So what we're gonna do in this video is obviously have a talk about this design. We're gonna look at the front end, the side, the rear, the interior, and then we're gonna take this for a drive, and this has the 6-speed manual, so I can't wait to do that. Before we jump into this masterpiece of a design, let's talk about some of the spec and tech here. We have a 3-liter turbo inline 6 putting out 406 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque connected to a 6-speed manual transmission. All that power is sent to the rear wheels. 0 to 60 is done in 4 seconds, and the top speed is 155 miles per hour. Fuel economy sits at 18 city, 25 highway, and this one is for sale for $60,000. Alright guys, so starting with the front end of the BMW M2 competition, and would you just have a look at this front end and the stunning design. It has classic traditional BMW graphics in a modern take. I think this is such a good looking BMW. If you're expecting redesigns in this video, that's not gonna happen because there is absolutely nothing on this car that I would like to change when it comes to the design. There are a couple of details on the front end that makes the competition special from the BMW M2. The main difference between the normal M2 and the competition is if you look at these gorgeous blacked out grills in the middle, very nicely designed with the top corner being up here. The differences between the competition and how you can tell that apart from the normal M2 is these grills are actually a lot more chiseled here than they are in the normal M2, and you also have a connection in the middle, so they morphed together like a cell almost about to split, and that's how you can tell how this is a competition compared to the normal M2. As I said in the beginning of this video, what I love about this design is that it is proper BMW. You can take these graphics and have a connection with the 80s and 90s BMW, but of course in a much modern way. You have a nice chamfer going around the headlights right here, and look how this angle goes up into almost like a Hawkeye of this angle in the headlight, and we have a clear separation between the top part of the graphics and the lower section. We have a proper bumper here. Some might say that this area is a little bit overstyled, specifically with this winglet that we have going here, but I think it adds character to this design, and it makes it a little bit more interesting than just having this be a a proper, just an opening without any sort of graphics around it. Overall guys, just comparing this to the current M2, there are completely different design philosophies. The new M2 feels more industrial, a lot more static, while this still has that organic, emotional feel to the overall styling of the front end. Let me know which one you prefer, the new 2023 M2 or compare it to this, the 2020, and let me know which one you prefer in the comments below. Now, coming around to the side view of the 2020 M2 competition, and if you were to study proportions of a small two-door coupe, this would be in that book for how to learn how to sketch proper proportions of this type of package. I love the design of this thing. Look at this sharp shoulder line that goes right here and then into this area, creating this graphic feature here. This is not a functional vent, but I think it has a purpose being on this car. Without it, it would feel like it's something is missing in that area, specifically when you compare to previous M3 E46, for example, and other M cars. You need to have some sort of graphics there. One detail I personally would not switch out on this specific M2 competition are these 19-inch wheels. No staggered setup here. You have 19s front and rear. You have 245 millimeters in the front and 265s in the rear, and I think this spoke design is such a gorgeous design. I want to see more designs like this from BMW, that they don't just black everything else, so you can actually see the design of the wheel itself. I think they suit this car overall, and it's definitely something I would keep on my M2 competition. So I know I said this has perfect two-door coupe proportions, but what exactly does that mean in practical terms? For example, I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. Follow this A-pillar all the way down, and this, I've showed you this before, but the line we want to have it disconnect with is the very center of the front axle, and that's exactly what's going on here. And looking at the B pillar, or the C pillar in this case, where it's positioned right above the rear axle. This corner here, the Hofmeister kink, which thankfully is intact in the 2020 M2 competition, it's positioned right above the rear axle. So these are the type of details that make up a very gorgeous design and proportions of a package like this. A couple of more details here on the M2 that makes this special from our normal 2 series is, for example, the M mirrors. I love the design of current M mirrors. I think they've been doing this since the E92 3 Series M3 with the V8, where they put this little horn right here. And I think this is a detail that, again, separates this and makes it feel a little more special than a regular old 2 Series. Coming around to the rear end of the M2 competition, and all the clean, organic, and natural lines that we have in the front and the side continues back here. I love everything that goes on here. There's nothing, as I said, that I want to redesign, because I think this is pretty close to a perfect design for what I would see do an M2 when it comes to the design of it. We have these LED taillights, which I love because you have a very dynamic feel to it. This is something that BMW is changing these days with the taillights. For example, on the new X3, having very static looking taillights. But here in 2020, they were still very dynamic with a thicker piece on the outside going into a thinner piece the closer we get to the center of the rear end. Now, if there is one detail that if I had to change anything in the rear end, it would be this lip spoiler here being in body colored. I would prefer to maybe have this be in carbon fiber just to set the contrast off a little bit, since we have a black diffuser at the bottom part with these gloss black quad bazooka M tailpipes in the bottom. I want to have something to connect with the black graphics down here, and I think just a black carbon fiber lip up here would do the trick. Now, you can't review M cars without having a proper straight rear view of the cars, because BMW has always been one of the best manufacturers when it comes to planting their cars coming straight out of the factory, and this is no different. We do have the wider rear fenders here going into this beautiful side chamfer, housing the graphics of the rear with these taillights and the big diffuser downstairs. We do have this line here that doesn't house a vent or anything like that, so they didn't add any unnecessary black plastic in this part. Instead, they just added the mandatory reflector light in this area, which I think also looks great. In the middle, we do have a backup camera. Welcome to the interior of the 2020 BMW M2, and I have to tell you, it feels great sitting in here. This is exactly the interiors that I want to see these days. Yes, I do understand that BMW needs to move with the times and create the iDrive 7, the iDrive 8. The 7 is a lot better than the 8 in my opinion, because we still have a proper gauge cluster here and a housing for it. But here we have an 8.8-inch infotainment screen. Do you really need anything else? And specifically when you're sitting in a 6-speed manual M2 competition, are you really gonna fiddle around with what's going on there? I don't think so. I'm not going to when I take this for a drive. And these gauge clusters here feel very interesting. They have this backlit to them. Let's turn this on so I can show you exactly what's going on here. The sound when you turn it on is also fantastic. This 3-liter inline 6, it's in so many BMWs these days, but it always feel and sound great when you're driving it. I love the gauge cluster because we have a clear font and a clear needle for the tachometer and the speedometer. There's nothing here that is unnecessary, and that's why I prefer these old interiors. You might call me an old timer or whatever, but that's the reason why I prefer these interiors, because in a performance car like this, the M2, you want to focus on the driving. I don't want to have unnecessary things going on here, and I think this is actually the perfect setup for this M2. The dials themselves, very crisp and clear. I'm not sure if they are digital or not. I've always been confused about that, because when you turn it off, you can see them very vaguely in the background. Then you turn it on, it feels like everything is backlit in a very even way. I do know that the lower part is definitely digital. You have analog speedometer to the left with the tachometer to the right, 2 big circles, absolutely perfect. Moving into this 8.8-inch infotainment screen here, I like the layout of it. I like the integration of it. It doesn't stick up above the hood line when I'm sitting in my driving position. So this sits lower, the top part of this infotainment screen sits lower than the hood. And that's a key feature that I'm looking for in integrations of screens like this. It's not big at all. It's very intuitive and very quick to just play around with. Go into navigation, you get a full map. Looking great, and as I said, it's everything you need. And then you have very conventional vents down here with the heated and cooled air, whichever you want to come out, and the opening and closing of the vents. You can see the fins for the vents themselves, so you know exactly where the air is going to come out without having to move your finger inside of a software to angle the air blowing at you. And down here you have the controls for the volume, for example, and the radio settings, the preset settings. Further down you have the controls for the climate control. Again, super easy to use, 2 scroll dials for the temperature, and you have the buttons for the heated seats, and a very simple button for where you want the air to blow out from. So everything is really easily and logically laid out inside of this M2. Now moving further down, you have a pad for your phone. I'm not sure if this is wireless charging. It doesn't look like it. I think they need to have a logo on it if it is. It's just a pad for your phone, and then you have a slider here that opens up for 2 cup holders and a normal USB with a 12-volt cigarette outlet. Down here you have a couple of buttons for the steering response if you want it to be in Comfort, Sport, or Sport Plus. I'm going to keep it in Sport Plus. When we go for a drive, you also have the settings for the drive mode here. So you have Efficient, Sport, and Sport Plus, and I think you know what I'm gonna keep it in. Above that, you have the button for the traction control and the parking assist. Now moving on to the center of the center console, you have the 6-speed manual transmission, and it feels very tight and snappy. I can't wait to get this out on the road and take this for a short drive. You do have some carbon fiber trim going around this area, which ends in a very abrupt way here. I think I would rather have this continue into the vent and have some connection there between these 2 graphic features. Moving further down, you do have some more carbon fiber here in the middle, and you have the buttons for if you want to use this dial. As always, you can do that, or you can use the touchscreen up on the screen. No matter what you use, you're still going to have the same functions. So for example, click the menu button, you're going to go to the home screen, and pretty self-explanatory. And then you have a proper manual e-brake here. Under the armrest, you do have the wireless charging right here. So this is not the wireless charging, this is just some rubberized platform up here. The wireless charging is here, and I like this wireless charging because it has this lock to it that you can slide. It doesn't matter how big or small your phone is, you can still fit it perfectly here, and it's gonna stay in place and not move around as you take those corners. And you also have a small compartment here with a USB and regular output and a quarter. Looking at this steering wheel, it feels fantastic to just grab this steering wheel with the leather wrap outside, and you have the M colors stitching in the inside of this wheel. Overall, it's a pretty basic wheel. You have the M1 configurations here, so you can program these to do whatever you want with the settings. Program them to M1 and M2. You have the cruise control settings, and on the left side, you have the controls for the volumes and the radio and the voice command. The styling of this wheel, I've always been a fan of this silver piece that goes around. It kind of holds the middle section of the wheel with, of course, the BMW logo on the inside and the M logo at the very bottom. On the left side of the steering wheel, you have, of course, a regular vent. You also have the controls for the light settings and lane departure assistance and stuff like that I usually just turn off because it's pretty annoying. If you just go close to the white line, it's going to start to shake the entire steering wheel. I'm not a huge fan of that. Looking at these seats though, I love these seats as well. They're not too aggressive, but they still have that M feel to them with these shoulder support up here going in this specific M fashion. And if you're mistaken what car you're in, you just have to look at the backrest because it says M2 right here. Not too aggressive, and I think they're just beautiful with this orange stitching. Since we have the sunset orange exterior, it comes back in the interior in a very beautiful and pretty subtle way. Up top, thankfully, we don't have a sunroof, and last but not least, we do have a rather large glove box for this type of package. Now this car it is technically a 4-seater, but it looks pretty tight back there. I could probably fit if we move the passenger seat all the way forward with my legs being 6'1", but other than that, probably not too comfortable to be on a long drive or a road trip in the back seat of an M2. We can't forget about the doors. The doors feel very functional and easily, or very simplistic in its styling. Feels pretty German to me with the orange stitching that we have on the seats coming back in the doors. You also have some pretty large compartments at the lower section and carbon fiber handles, which I think looks great and connects with the rest of the interior. Alright guys, setting off in the 2020 BMW M2 competition. This car is, for me, this car is almost a bucket list car to drive. I know it's not as powerful or expensive as an M8 competition, for example, but that's not what this car is about. This car is so much about the design and the analog feel, because I feel like this is one of the last analog BMWs we're maybe ever gonna get. And the fact that they packaged this driving experience in such a gorgeous exterior, it just, to me at least, it just makes this a dream car. So I have everything in Sport Plus, the things we can put in Sport Plus, meaning the steering and I guess the drive mode, which is this button down here. So it is as tight as it can be. Under the hood we have a 3-liter turbocharged inline 6 and it goes 406 horsepower in this thing, and it's rear-wheel drive, so it is a quick car and it's very, very tail happy. This is one of these cars that when I've looked at reviews on the new M2, they don't say, a lot of people say don't go for the manual because the manual feels like an afterthought in the new M2 and it's almost built around the automatic, but it is complete. I don't think they say that about this generation M2 because this manual transmission is just fantastic, and you also have automatic rev matching, as I just noticed. And I'm going to come back to this gauge cluster once again. I love the layout of this thing. It is just so intuitive and logical to have the gauges like we have here with all the info that you need up here on the infotainment screen. It's just, as I said when we talked about the interior, to me it just feels like a perfect laid out interior in this thing. And this color as well, the exterior sunset orange, just looks stunning in the sunlight. I know I'm raving about this M2, but what can I say? It's just one of my favorite BMWs of the last 30 years. Let's check the handling in this traffic circle here. And what do you expect? I mean, it's a BMW M2. It's small, agile, and let's get out of this traffic circle. Second gear. Into third. Oh, what a car this is. You know, this reminds me of the Lotus Evora that I drove on this exact same road. It has the same brutal almost feel to it, and it's just a pure joy to go through the gears and feel the seats hugging you as you take the corners. And this rev matching sounds incredible as well. You know, this might be one of these cars that I personally want in my garage, to categorize this type of car, to just have a car when you want to take a break from work and you want to go out for a drive. Oh my god, this is the car to have. So comparing this to the new M2, which I also drove not that long ago here, it is what you expect it to be. The new M2, it's a great car and it drives fantastic, but here it just feels more natural to have the manual transmission, and I love driving this thing. I think I love driving this more than I do the new M2 with the automatic. And you know, we don't have any head-up display, or you know, when you're driving this car, there's nothing in the interior that distracts you from the fact that you're driving this machine. So let's do one more pull here. First gear. That noise is fantastic. And it kind of feels more powerful than 406 horsepower. And I think that has to do with the weight and the package of this thing. You also have 405 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 in about, I think it's about 4 seconds. But it feels, again, it feels a lot quicker because it's such a small car. Overall, it's just one of BMW's masterpieces, this BMW M2. And if I were to pick the new one or this one now that I've driven both, honestly, just the looks of this thing, the driving experience, the connection you have with this manual transmission compared to the connection you disconnected to have the new M2, I'm honestly gonna go with this generation M2. Oh, I don't want to give this car back. It's such a cool driving experience. But thank you to Winslow BMW here in Colorado Springs. If you're interested in this car, which I think the majority of you are, go and check them out at winslowbmw.com. And if you enjoy these type of videos, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in the next video.